is one of the first things she did as a result of that. By and by, she decided she needed to get out of the place that she was in, and she's now here on campus and working on various things. But she's here, and so we asked her to tap into one of her knowledgeable areas, which is nonviolent communication.
Awesome.
And so, so she has worked that over with a kind of permaculture-inspired framework, I'm going to say. She can correct me when I get stuff talking. But I'm really excited for this. I'm going to be, like I said, I'm going to put on my student hat and only take it off a few times probably. So, okay, so let's have a little applause for Amy.
Well, thank you, Josh, and a little clarification I think is needed. I did not solely put on permaculture classes. There was 4 of us from Cache Valley that came down, and the 4 of us collaborated. And one of my values is collaboration, and I think it made for a really meaningful experience for all of us, and lifted the burden in some ways too, right? So highly recommend collaboration. And making sure that you're, among your group, you're making connections and sharing information, because despite the fact that you start out really refreshed, and by the end of the 12 days, you're a little bit like, okay, it's time to go home now. Those connections are ones that took root in some really meaningful soil here. So, yeah. I am really glad you're here, and just generally welcome. The presentation itself is, from my perspective, going to be patterns of nonviolent communication. So let's and for the simplicity of writing it, it's frequently just NVC. Just a quick note about questions and comments. I totally welcome them. Let them come in. Let's get clarification about the principles. What's common with nonviolent communication is you're just going to start reflecting on recent interactions, family members at home, tension that was brought up on a recent phone call with a friend or family member, and you're going to start wondering, okay, what could I have done better? What did I do? What could have, just really starting to work it out in your brain. And that's normal. I just don't think that's going to be what we create this space for. Let's save all this time for really understanding the principles, and then I'm happy. Let's talk during meals, let's talk after class, NVC is one of my happy places to be. But even when we do talk about your specific situation, I'll probably ask you to tie it back to the principle. What is it that you could have taken from this and put it into your conversation? So it's this time of day, the afternoon sun, it's a little warmer up here. You guys are tired, possibly. Ready for a little bit longer than a 5-minute break. I get that. I'm going to add to that now by giving you what might seem like some more wordiness and some tedious details about language. But I want you just to stick with me. By the end of this, what I hope you have is something that really touches your heart and opens up your life to more meaningful connection and interaction. Okay? And it will require practice. There's just no way to take this 2 hours and give you everything you need to practice at a higher level of communication. Okay. This is my high school days, my heart at peace symbol, and then over here we're going to just contrast for a little bit, okay? Because like Josh, I like to start with the heart, and I'm going to tie this into a man named Martin Buber. He was a philosopher, an Israeli philosopher actually, and what he philosophized about was two different ways of being. Okay, so we've got one way of being and another way of being. This one is actually, in his language, I, thou. Simply myself interacting with another person, another individual who has hopes, dreams, fears, worries. Over here, instead of I, thou, it's I, it. Okay. And the main distinction being here, personness, like a block to the personness, or the person has become an object to me. To see a person as an object is to resist them, to resist their humanity. And I think it helps to know 5 different ways that we can resist people. Now, right, because we've all been in both places. This is not a shame moment or a judgment moment. This is raising our awareness. So 5 ways. Okay, one way I can see someone as an object is that they are they are better than me. So-and-so has long, blonde, wavy hair. Man, they are amazing, and I have just demoralized myself and put them on a pedestal. But yet, in putting them on that pedestal, I turn them into an object, and I've lost touch with their humanity. Okay? And that can take many different forms, right? It's just one example. The next one is they are similar comparison, but flipped. He's got a PhD, and I only got a high school diploma. He's obviously smarter, has it all together, and I've just created a comparison. Oh, sorry, that was the other one before. So, worse than me.
You have a PhD.
I have a PhD, and I really hate to associate with those with these low-level intellectual abilities. Thank you, Josh.
Yes.
There. Right,
I know all about that.
You can just sense that as Josh is teaching. The next one, actually, I'm going to make sure I spell it right. The person is labeled by me. This is so common in our society. We love to attach labels to things.
Dirty hippie.
He's a cowboy. Ben's a dirty hippie. I get the label single mom. I've had friends call me a hippie before. Or even food type eating preference labels, like I'm a vegetarian, that's a label. And there's some, right, they can go from all the way from, they seem really pleasant and this is totally normal to put a label to this, down to right down harmful when we see it like, my grandma used to say nigger, you know, right? And she meant it negatively half the time, and it was a label, and that one's a little more obviously hurtful, right? But in my opinion, and from nonviolent communication, the whole gamut of labels put that wall up between me and the other person.
A common example that goes overlooked, among the less obvious, as you were mentioning, is parents labeling their children, and those labels becoming self-fulfilling prophecies. So you're a teaser, you don't like doing homework, you're a jokester, any things that could maybe seem somewhat innocuous or somewhat innocuous, they end up being really heavy things for your children to carry without even knowing.
Absolutely, and positive versions. You're so smart. Just as hurtful. The idea, they did a study, if I can go tangential for just a moment, and gave 2 groups of kids some math work to do. And it was pretty basic math work. But the first group, they said, you're so smart, praise in this way. The other group, they said, wow, you worked hard to accomplish completing this work. And then they gave the groups both another set of math problems a little bit harder, and this group tended towards giving up. They had the label as smart, they got hit with something that was a little bit more challenging, and that label was no longer true, they just gave up. Whereas the other group continued to work hard. They were acknowledged for this character trait, this effort that they put into it instead of some arbitrary label.
So what are the difference between label and compliment? There seems to be a fine line.
We can talk about nonviolent compliments.
Okay, awesome. You're gonna get to that, okay.
Yes. So
Let's check it out.
first up, awareness. You're such a great mom, right? That has the desire in it. We're not trying to be hurtful, but there's a way to just elevate our compliments to really create communication and connection between them. Okay. You may have to remind me, so take note, just like nonviolent compliments.
You got it.
Okay, fourth one is an obstacle in my way. Picture yourself at the grocery store, you've got some place to be, you're right on the border of I'm going to be late unless I'm just hopping right through this next task that I need to do. But then there's someone in the front line, or in front of you in line, and it's really easy to switch into putting that person in a place of, what, you're going to, like, now you need them to go run and get you some different grapes, and then they are the reason why you're late. They are an obstacle in your way. They have become an object and you put up a wall towards them. It's not a real wall, right? It's something coming from here that blocks our hearts from being able to still see each other. And 5 is irrelevant, or they're just completely discounting it. Irrelevant.
So that last one is kind of like a non-entity or a non-object.
Yeah.
You're nothing.
Yeah, almost to where, let's say you're walking in a downtown suburban area and you feel fear around a population there that might be on drugs or, so instead of seeing them, just put up the blinders and go. That's a possible example. Or maybe our personal biases towards other groups of people. Those would have to be something to consider. Okay, so 2 main groups, right? I vow. I think you're going to see how it comes into play with communication even more as we go. But before, maybe it's sufficiently done, but I do want to have you just take a moment. Think of a close friend, somebody who things are generally warm between you. Your conversations are uplifting, right? That's going to be a relationship that typifies I vow. And here, I'm sure there's people you know that fall into this. You might even physically feel the difference in your heart space. But instead of getting into like personals, I thought of an example. Picture that you and another individual got in a car wreck. It's actually the other individual that caused the car wreck. They hit you. Now you're both out of your car, and that person is in your face angry that you are the cause for this whole thing, right? So obviously they came out of their car in this state of heart, and they're inviting you to join them here. And this is a choice. But just, you can feel the difference. If somebody's just in your face, in the moment, angry, attacking you, your first response might be to just do exactly that, like, whoa, and even like, oh, I'm out of here, get out of that scene as fast as you can. Another principle that'll be important to know is you can do any action from any of these 2 heart spaces. So, I can go to the grocery store this way, and I can go to the grocery store this way. I can go take soup to an elderly neighbor this way, and I can do it this way. I can vacuum this way, right? More so trying to act out what's in here, or
I've vacuumed that way.
where was your heart though, Josh?
Oh.
Was that just like needing to get done, or was your heart like?
No, I was totally caught up in needing to get that vacuuming done.
That's funny.
Because I mean, right?
So it's it's that relationship with yourself. You're treating yourself as an object, or you're treating yourself as a person.
There you go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more about the heart state at that moment. If a person were to walk in while you were vacuuming, or you were just tiny grumbles and your heart's at war, you'd have a hard time responding to them in the sense where now that there's a person in the picture, you can open up to them and be, in that peaceful state with them. Okay. So communication, let's jump there now. What does communication mean? Talk is one that Josh and I looked up, and it's an easier one perhaps. It comes from tale, which means story. Which, story is really anciently how we conveyed all of our morals and values and teachings to each generation. Story is what allows anything really to stick as we're learning it, if it's encapsulated inside the shell of the story. And then communication itself, put that one over here, comes from communico. And the eco makes it a verb. But communis, which is the root there, is common, public, general.
So that would be the same word for community.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice association there. Okay, and as I was processing this a little bit, my definition turned into more of, borrowing from this and incorporating this. Share, transmit, or make common our internal condition to the outer world. And it's important to know that it involves both giving and receiving. There's a partaking that happens in communication and an outward giving. Okay?
Could you repeat that, please?
Just the last part about partaking.
Well, your definition of
Oh, yeah.
communication.
Thank you for the clarification. So my definition was to share, transmit, or make common our internal condition to the outer world.
Your definition of communication,
Yes, how I interpreted
that word.
the roots of the word communication. So, we're obviously talking about a person with a really long neck. Clearly. Yes.
Let's
And
not
we're going
label
to-
them though.
Some
kind of long neck.
We're obviously going to be talking about communication, which has a component of speech, but there's these internal states that are going to combine and be what actually produce the output. Right? The words that come out came from somewhere. They didn't just, this was my statement of anger towards you. The anger started here. Thought on the anger, and then together they went out and were expressed in words. Or in the nonverbal expressions even, right? Let's not discount eye contact, tone of voice, body language, Yes.
Just regarding your audience, we recently talked about how the heart is the combination of what's in the mind and what is in the emotions are represented in the gut. And so we see the output of the heart as a function of some combination of the mind and the gut also. And I just say that to highlight that our outlook is not to consider the mind as the rational and the heart as the emotional, but rather the heart is some function of the two. I think that we talked about that a lot and had a lot of really great insight together on that. So that's part of where your audience is coming from.
Yes. Communication doesn't happen to just be in isolation. This is the process of, right, sharing. It's that giving, that receiving. It's mutual, not always in words. But what happens if, for example, coming more from this closed space and we put up walls? Some of our common walls in our society right now is this fear of vulnerability, right? Like, I can't say that. Better just not. I'll stop it, right? And it blocks the connection that can happen. So, nonviolent communication itself, it was written by, but the principles were thought through and then explained in this book. The author is Marshall Rosenberg. Kind of a short, concise, what is nonviolent communication? It's a process of interpersonal communication designed to improve compassionate connection to others. I'm going to say this one more time. NVC is a process of interpersonal communication designed to improve compassionate connection to others.
Designed to
Improve compassionate communication to others. It's also referred to, even just right here in the subtitle, a language of life, or it's been referred to as compassionate communication, or life-enhancing communication. I want that one here. And the opposite is life alienating. The basics of NVC are 2 parts, and then those 2 parts flow into 4 parts. So the 2 parts, we'll mention the 4 parts, we'll get to the 4 parts later, but just pay attention to the keywords in these 2 parts. Expressing honestly, the 4 parts, and receiving empathetically, the 4 parts. Right? Comes back to this idea again. We are expressing honestly and receiving empathetically. And we'll use the 4 parts as part of this growth, the 4 components. Okay, I want to tell you a story. Am I going to do this? Okay. So this is from Marshall's life. He was in a bus transit station in the waiting area in San Francisco. In his walking there, he saw some examples of more of this, and he had noticed his internal state of sadness over the state of human interaction, but then he went on to observe this interaction here. There was an elderly man, migrant farmer, and he was sitting with an orange in his lap, and it looked like he had just finished his brown bag lunch, right? And this orange was the last thing that was left. And then near him, sitting just across the way, or room a little bit was a mom and her young child. The toddler sitting in his mom's lap, and he was staring at this orange. The older gentleman sees the young boy's interest and stands up with his orange, walks across the room, and gesturing to the mother, basically without words, is it okay that I offer this orange to your son? And she smiles and welcomes this gesture. And just as he's about to give this orange to the little boy, he stops, kisses the orange, and then gives it to the little boy. Okay. What's even greater is that Marshall just didn't observe and go off on his way. He went and sat next to this man and gave him a compliment. He basically wanted this man to know that he had seen what he had done and that he was personally very touched by it. The migrant very older gentleman just, smiled, kind of just taking that in, somewhat pleased with himself, and Marshall goes on to explain a little more clearly, specifically what touched him. He said, I really was impressed when you kissed that orange before you gave it to the boy. And again, the older gentleman sits with that in silence for a bit, and then he responds, I have lived for 65 years, and if there is one thing I have learned, it is never to give unless I give from the heart. So I want you to consider an occasion from your own life. It can be recent, it can be years ago. Something that was an experience where you experienced that joy of giving to someone, or where someone gave and you felt that it was straight from their heart. And it can be, any type of gift. It could be physical, it could have been time or attention, it could be words that they offered you, but you felt it here and you know that it came from their heart specifically. So take a moment to think of that memory, and then I'm going to give you a moment just to sit with the emotion. So don't mind the silence, go ahead and think. And then what I want you to do, if you have this memory of this giving from the heart, just tap into the feelings that woke up in you because of that giving from the heart. And then just sit with those feelings for about another minute. Okay. So keep that in mind, that really at the core of all of the words that are coming about NVC, we are creating that open, compassionate connection between individuals, a real giving from the heart and an ability to receive in that way that opens us up to feelings of peace, happiness, joy, connection. Okay. Ben so kindly offered to do a little role play with me. As we do that, you can think about if we're using this kind of communication or this kind of communication.
I apologize in advance.
I think we know which one it's going to be.
I'm going to smile through the whole thing because it'll be funny to me in a way, but it's not funny.
It's not funny.
Just forget we're here.
Ready? Amy, there you are. How could you?
Oh my gosh. What?
You don't even know. You don't even know what you did.
No what?
You know what? I'm not going to tell you. You tell me what you did.
I'm supposed to tell you
But
something.
you need to. You know what? I'm going for a walk. Okay, let's make it up.
Does anyone else need a hug?
So what did you do, Amy? I'm really curious now.
Honestly, we just copied that from a clip that we saw. But really, you see like these clips, these negative interactions, and you're just like, whoa! And quite literally, we needed a hug after that, right? Just to clear any negative energy.
So the clip was an example of the type of communication that is given to you as an example every day through media, music, viewing different interactions on the street. And they are propagated throughout generations as the way you can do it, the way some people do it, but there are very many good examples of healthy ways to communicate. So.
Yeah, right? Like if those are what you see from the moment you're sitting up at your parents' feet until the day you die, you'll tend towards those messages that are coming back. So part of what I'm doing, even when we show that to you or we go and elaborate on what is life alienating communication, isn't to, again, have that shame or how dare you use this, is to raise awareness. Because once we have further awareness, we'll be able to see it in our media, we'll be able to see it in ourselves and start that process to shifting into something we more intentionally want to create between, our in and throughout all of our relationships. And then, for some reason, this just popped into my brain right now. But really, how do we interact with ourselves sometimes too? Do we tend towards treating ourselves and criticizing ourselves and having these negative or experiencing negative results from how we think about ourselves, and even shifting this so that our heart and our minds show compassion towards ourselves? So I want to go through a quick list of specific life alienating communication labels. Okay, we'll go to this point. So we've got diagnose, judge, analyze, criticize. Have you guys ever experienced those in interactions that you've had? Really, I'm going to kind of clump these three into a similar one. They're just more different ways to word a similar approach. And clarify just this idea of judgment in general. Have you guys ever found that dichotomy, like in the scriptures, right? Like, don't judge righteously. And you're like, okay, I'll do my best.
I'll do my best to do that and not do that.
Yes.
Exactly.
So super clear. We obviously have been doing an excellent job at doing just that, judging and not judging. And I want to clarify that there's different ways to judge, and one of them we absolutely want to do, and one of them ideally we're going to become aware of and kind of shift that out of our language. So the one that we want to keep doing is a values judgment. Right, we want to be aware of what things we value, what qualities in life are meaningful to us. So, for example, it might be beauty or simplicity, or I mentioned earlier that I really value collaboration, right? So I want to take a moment and just get a few things that you identify as your values. So, David, what do you value?
One of the things.
There you go. Yes, that's a good nice. Is there a certain type of food that's just like, yes? I know, because Josh would say organic food, right?
Yeah, I mean, just clean whole foods, basically.
Okay, right? Being really specific about what you value is not a bad thing. Becca, how about you? What do you value?
I value efficiency.
Ooh,
Okay.
that's surprising.
And I don't know, anyone else just want to offer a value that's popped into your head?
Integrity.
Okay.
Friends.
Okay.
Hard work.
Awesome. Okay. Keep that in mind. What we're gonna try to clarify is this idea of a moralistic judgment. I am judging an individual as either good or bad, right or wrong, worth my attention or not. From Rosenberg himself, he says, moralistic judgment implies wrongness or badness on the part of people who don't act in harmony with our values. So we need to be aware of both. But just because Danny values hard work, does that mean my son, who's still learning the value of that and sometimes would rather go off and play instead of doing his chore, does that mean he's bad suddenly, right?
No.
Or not worth our Danny's attention because they don't like it. It's really beginning to tease that out, to see the value and still choose to see the person. Really, just in our society, we preoccupy ourselves with this. Like, who's good, who's bad, what's abnormal, what's responsible, who's irresponsible, who's smart, who's ignorant. And it goes on and on, right? It's on this classifying of people.
If you don't wear a mask, you're bad.
Yes. Uh-huh.
You clearly don't care about people.
If you do wear one, you're bad.
Yeah, it does. So making just to clarify for my own mind, making a moralistic judgment is knowing I value hard work. Like all of my values are hard work, integrity, food, wholesome food. So you're judging people that don't live by your ascribed values as bad and not worth your time. Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to write a few words here. It's really focused on classifying, analyzing, determining levels of wrongness.
Amy, you're probably going to answer this, but how do you treat, you said you see the person, so how do you treat the person who doesn't like hold foods and has integrity and whatever your values are?
Okay. So I value whole food and integrity. I come across a person who does not. Let's go with the whole food vein a little bit, right? Like, there's this at the root. How am I going to see that person? Can we have different values and I still see what makes them human? Their fears, their dreams, their hopes.
Okay.
Maybe even, experiences that they had in their life that leave them suffering from trauma.
So it sounds like you go to the point of communion, which means common. This is what we have separate, but what do we have in communion?
That's a great place to start, right? Is it possible, maybe, to find something in common with almost anyone we meet?
For sure.
It's a great place to start. You might find, all right, this person irks me, is eating all these corn dogs and hamburger helper.
How dare he?
But is there a way to get to where you could shift from that kind of mask of the label and the analyzing and seeing that they don't have that same value as you and come back to seeing them as a person? And so what I heard you say was starting to look for even one thing that you have in common among values would allow you to do a shift over into this kind of heart space towards that person.
Yes, and what I heard from you is that that's a good start.
Yes.
We are like NVCing right now.
Yes.
Ooh, that felt good. Class dismissed.
I enjoyed the conversation about NVC, and when we get to use just that communication that, has all these points that are not that. So let's keep going though.
Amy, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
So as you and I have been talking about this, I've put myself in this situation mentally quite a bit, and for me, like my little cheat mental game is if I am interacting with someone that I'm having a hard time humanizing and turning into a person in my mind, I try to imagine what it would take for me to be put in a state where I would act like that person, and then that helps me to empathize with them and see them again as a person.
Wait, say that again, Ben. I didn't quite catch it.
So if I'm interacting with someone and having a hard time doing the I-thou interaction, doing them that way, I try to take a step back and imagine what kind of situation or circumstance would make it so that I were behaving like that.
Oh, okay, got it. Like,
And
what kind of trauma would you have to have in your
Or
life?
what kind of a really bad day or week or...
Right, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Oh, thank you, Ben. I read a book called something. Oh, the name of the book will come later. It's about trauma, and this doctor kind of charts his experience through the medical field from when they were just discovering what trauma was before there was a diagnosis manual, all the way up to more present day, and even through medications and what things really help people have deep traumas. But the very beginning of the book starts with this many people out of this many people have had their spouse abuse them. This many people out of this many people were abused as children, having their parents physically act out of them. This many out of this many. And the numbers were shocking. The amount of hurt that is in our world is astounding. The amount of people who are hiding hidden wounds is larger than maybe we realize unless we've opened ourselves up to have that awareness. And I appreciated even that just first couple chapters of that book because it did just that for me. My compassion for the human race and for those who suffer under that weight was expanded. So then, this one won't surprise you when I add comparing here. Alright, it comes back to what we learned earlier. Who is it that says comparing is the thief of joy? I try teaching my kids that the second you make this comparison of you and another, he's better at chess, or he's smarter, or he's further along in math, or I'm short compared to this kid. You robbed the joy out of the very essence of who you are. Your height is just wonderful, but once you made that comparison, joy is depleted.
There's a fine line between judging because you in fact are shorter than me. However, that doesn't make me less than you. And I think that's an important distinction because, I mean, you are better than me at NVC. But that doesn't make me, I don't know,
What I heard you say is that we can observe, right? Those observations can be made. But once we enter the realm of this is what I see in you and this is what I see as deficient or better than that in you, that's when we have entered the realm of comparing. Is that?
yeah, you can be better. I mean, I'm here because Josh is better than me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
That's a moralistic judgment. Josh is more knowledgeable in many things than you, but whether or not he's better because of that is is a moralistic judgment.
So what I was going to say, yeah, I agree. I think I might agree with that. And I think it's okay for people to be better than other people. It doesn't make me, just because Josh is better than me at permaculture, I can take that two ways. I can say, I'm not enough, or something else, which I don't know what that would be.
Maybe
But
I accept that Josh has more knowledge and I choose to learn from him.
yeah, and he's willing to teach me. So let's guild up.
All right, let's do it.
That on the meme list. Yelled up.
Amy.
Oh, that's okay. Off of Brad's comment here, it's not that we're better than other people. One body, many parts. We all have an equal important function to play on this earth. Whether you believe in God or not, it's true. We all work together for one purpose. And I believe that's to serve our Heavenly Father. So take that as you will.
Right? Like, I'll just leave that.
Enough said, huh?
And Brad, I think we'll come back to this when we go more into, we'll delve into observe, and there's a way to observe in which we mix judgment with it. So you want to really see things clearly, but not get it convoluted with a moralistic judgment. So that's coming.
So the comparing in this within the scope of making a judgment. So to compare in isolation is abstract. It isn't necessarily, oh, I see you're a tall person, and I'm not that tall. But to associate it with some kind of judgment is where we would go wrong. Is that the correct way to say it?
Slightly. I want to adjust one thing. You said comparison, but we're actually more here on observe. So yes, observe, but comparisons, I would say, are always dangerous territory.
I think the point is where it all of a sudden makes me less than. It doesn't make me less than. You can be better, but it doesn't make me less than.
So you're moving. That's observe what you're describing.
Okay.
You observed that you didn't add something on to that observation. Is that what you're saying?
I think what I'd say is it comes down to this, right? In your heart, when you observe this and see a higher level of skill or knowledge or physical ability, whatever it might be, you don't let that difference become something that demoralizes you.
So if you do a comparison with an I-it relationship, that person is smarter than me, and you're treating that person as an it rather than another human, then that would qualify. Okay.
Can I ask Josh a question? No, I'll do it later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Josh totally has things to add to this conversation for sure.
Okay, then can I ask it? So, what does that mean when you add the it? I want to understand that better. Josh, you are smarter than me.
So if you're using me, if you've objectified me as some smart guy, some oracle of knowledge, but in that you've made me not a human, not another person. So you put them up on a pedestal. So you could take President Trump and you could say he is a bulldog in a China house, he is strong, he can, and you're not really thinking about the man, the human being, but you've made him into an icon of what you want him to be. Anytime that you take the humanity out of the other person in the consideration, you're going to end up in a situation where there's a negative effect that you create, and that's going to affect you and people around you. And so if you're making observations about President Trump, and your heart is like, I'm a human, he's a human, that's going to change the outcome of what you're thinking. So again, it comes down to a heart condition. Am I idolizing somebody? Because typically we think about, if we objectify somebody, we see them as inferior to ourselves, like they're not as important as I am. But you can objectify someone in the opposite sense and say they're better than me. But in so doing, you've actually, essentially, again, there's a danger, let's say, of making that person into an object from your perspective. So you can go to a doctor. Here's a good example. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, you have cancer. And you say, well, the doctor is a smart man. The doctor knows. The doctor went to college. The doctor sees sick people all day long. And so who am I to go against his recommendation? Because you're treating him as a doctor, as an it.
Okay. I'll let it stew.
Yeah. If you treat him as a thou, the doctor is another human. And to err is human. So in that case, you might say, okay, that guy has an opinion. Maybe I should talk to another guy and get his opinion. Maybe he doesn't necessarily, most humans don't have all knowledge, so maybe his diagnosis is wrong. Okay, let's move on then.
Okay, so thank you for taking that question. We have denial of responsibility. And this is specifically in reference to how we can use our language to deny our own responsibility for our actions. And this is really dangerous. I mean, extreme examples of some of the horrific things that happen in concentration camps. Why did you torture so-and-so? Why did you not allow them to have enough food? The boss said so. I needed my job. To keep my job, I had to follow what the, lead guard said. So that's an extreme way that this can be taken as very dangerous. So acknowledging that we are all responsible for our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, right? And sometimes it's our thoughts and our feelings that we sometimes try and quickly ascribe to someone. So that can look in language like, I have to go to school. I don't want to. My mom's making me, right?
She made me mad.
Yeah. You make me feel angry. Or you make me feel happy, right? But is the result of our feelings actually something that's coming from the outside?
This is probably going down in a way that you don't want to go, but I'm going to say it and then you decide where you want to go. So we talked a lot about water, and we talked a lot about how water's affected and how got a lot of water in us. What's the relationship between my presence affecting you versus taking responsibility and not being affected? Because we've learned in this class that I truly have an effect. You have an effect.
I mean, how this sounds. You or any of your actions are a stimulus that I then choose to respond to.
Okay, cool. That sounds amazing.
She has domain over herself if she wants to have it.
Okay, it's her water, not mine.
Yeah, now she can not know she has domain, right? She can not understand how to block that.
Right. Got it.
But with maturity, she can just have you talk to the hand.
Yeah. Because I ain't listening.
So she asserts control over her water. She has stewardship over her water. You can't override that.
Yeah.
Unless she allows it through ignorance or choice.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So I want to give you guys a chance to practice, alright? So I'm going to give you a phrase, I want you to reword it so that it's actually showing responsibility of my actions in the words. So we'll start with, I have to go to the car to get my things.
My things are in the car.
I think I'm gonna go get them.
I choose
I'll be
to
right
go
back.
to the car to get some things.
Yeah, I'll be right back. I gotta leave the car. I left some stuff in there.
Got to though.
Oh,
So you're
no.
right, it's in there. I gotta go. No, I'm choosing to go get my thing.
Right.
We wouldn't really go and talk like that, but just making it really
Also-
obvious. I am choosing in this moment.
I want to get my things. I'm going to the car.
Right, if you don't want to go get your things, do you have to?
No.
Nobody's there like
Depends on what the
poking you
thing
with a
is.
prodding knife.
Wow.
Funny story. We had a friend that said he decided to do that, but he would always say something like that. You know, even if it was a conversation, and he didn't want to be part of that conversation anymore. Like, I want to leave right now. He only did it about 5 times before. Yeah.
So let me interject a story here of another Josh.
Josh, are there?
There's many. This is Josh Lane, my friend from 4th grade.
Oh,
And he had this remarkable ability to speak the truth.
no way.
So you'd be like, hey Josh, let's go to the park and do this and that. And he would say, yeah, I don't want to do that. Doesn't sound fun to me. And that was the end of the conversation.
How is the?
But what was beautiful, I mean, it was like, oh, you don't want to hang out with me, but you couldn't really ever get there with it because he was just being so honest about his feel, like the man doesn't want to. And you're like, oh, okay. But what if he says to you, oh, you know, I'm kind of busy. You know it's not the truth. And now you're not sure why he's saying that. Is he kind of busy? Does he not like you? Does he have diarrhea? We don't know. So he was just so great. It was so refreshing. No, that does not sound fun to me. I'm not going with you. He's really good at it. It's a talent.
So let's do one more. Oh, sorry, Carrie.
I appreciate that when even if we don't verbalize it, even I think verbalizing it is a great thing to do. Even if we don't verbalize it, if at a minimum we acknowledge it in our minds. I appreciate the power that resides in recognizing when we're making a choice. Thank you.
Alright, next one we're gonna just switch. So, back with that feeling idea, like, you make me feel irritable. How would we reword that one? Now, I haven't given you a lot of the skills of the feelings and needs part, but
I think it could be something as simple as saying, I feel frustrated right now. I don't even necessarily have to ascribe it to someone, just say, I feel frustrated.
Or I feel this way when you this thing because that.
I statement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I statements, I stay away from them.
Oh.
Let me explain. It's not that they're bad. I think everyone who's learned an I statement needs to learn NVC.
Yes.
They're so easily twisted and turned into just a slam right at their core. Using an I statement.
It's true.
It's so if used well, with the heart in the right place and no accusation, no blaming, yes.
If I use one of the, I was trying to figure out, I was scared to use an I statement all of a sudden.
But wait, so I didn't follow that. So she used a nice statement that can be okay, but what was not okay?
Not necessarily hers exactly, just the statement that,
excuse me.
do you have an example of a?
Well, it's the turn to answer Josh's question is when I get angry when you didn't take out the trash.
Then
It
it's
ends
been,
in you. I'm blaming you.
Yeah.
Me being angry has nothing to do with whether you take the trash out or not. It's
Yeah.
I'm
And also, if you say, I am angry, you just put yourself over in the other side. You just decided to be angry. You should never decide to be that.
Well, do you want to take a shot at the sentence?
So, what was it? You make me feel
I
irritated.
feel angry because you observed behavior, and then what's the next part?
You just said I'm angry with you or something like that. What was it?
You make me so
You make
angry.
me feel so irritable. Or you make me feel so irritated.
Yeah, let's see. So
That's hard.
I need to go to bed.
I need to get some fresh air.
Can I
I
take
am imagining that there was some internal recognizing of emotions and needs, and that you
Yes.
figured out that there was a need for rest before another action might have been.
That is a good idea.
So the way I've been taught is that I don't have enough love inside of me, and I'm being triggered by your actions, type of thing. And so, that I don't have enough love right now. I need to separate myself or whatever. I need to
With
go
you
to-
taking full responsibility for the state of your
Yeah, whether they didn't take out the garbage, whether I had to tell my son 5 times to do things, whether he jumped off and I told him, whatever, it doesn't matter.
So I can say, I'm experiencing a feeling that might make this a hard conversation. Can we do this later?
And, I mean, you guys are doing the best you can right now. Having given you a lot of
It's like, how do you do without
That's good,
I?
but we can do
That's
that.
hard.
I mean, I acknowledge it's goodness that I give you some skills to go along with these.
Okay, give us some skills.
Yes.
Give us some skills with a Z on me.
Skills, wow. I'm not judging your spelling at all.
We need some hacking skills.
Part of the problem is that Babylon has taught us that there are justified reasons to be angry. And now there are some, I guess, in the Bible because God was angry
Yes,
at
there
times.
Oh, that's righteous indignation. That's not anger.
Okay, great. Well then,
Right, just saying.
Babylon has taught us that it's okay to be angry, so we were all stumped when we were like, you make me frustrated. It was like, there is no re-evaluating that. It's wrong. It's just wrong.
So isn't it human to feel
What he just said.
it, and
Yeah.
it's what we do with that
Yeah,
that counts?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not wrong to feel angry, it's how much you get.
Yeah,
Something
actually-
out on your anger.
That's
Well,
a
that-
beautiful basic point, right? Our feelings are neither good nor bad. We don't need to go over here with our feelings and start labeling them. They are gifts to us. And with NVC, when we get into these 4 steps, we're going to talk about needs. Our feelings are clues into whether or not our needs are being met. Anger is an interesting one that Josh brought up. There's a whole chapter expressing anger fully. Just to touch on it quickly, though I do recommend reading it.
What's the book called again?
This is nonviolent communication.
Gotcha.
Oh. Maybe this is better for me to find the specific point later. Okay, this I think is it. The cause of our anger lies in our thinking, in thoughts and blame and judgment. Okay, so I'm saying, or Marshall Rosenberg is saying that your anger is what you're focusing on here. Now, when I taught you I, it, and I, thou, any action can be done from either of these 2 places. So I can be angry here, which I think once as we gain these skills, we'll say, okay, I feel angry. What was the stimulus of my anger? What is my need that's not being met? And what can I do to help get that need met? Okay, I'm jumping ahead just a little bit. But over here, if we've closed ourselves off and we allow ourselves just to think and dwell on the anger, we're probably, pushing that responsibility on someone else. They made me angry. We're just kind of in this state. So the anger in and of itself is not bad. Ben, you said something about anger earlier. Anger can be an indication, right, of where you are at. Is your heart in a state of heart at war? Is it open? Is it soft? I think it would be more about how long you're dwelling in that anger. And a heart free of anger is typically more of a soft heart, where here the heart at peace. And way back in the back.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I made that comment to you, I was thinking that there's a difference in recognizing your emotional state, and maybe that state is anger or frustration, but seeing that and then saying, oh, I'm feeling this way, and still being on the I thou side. Whereas on the at war side, you're quick to jump to, I'm angry at this or this. This made me angry, and there's sort of an embracing and blame attached to it.
All right, so first component, let's just quickly list these up. We've got observe.
So are these components of life-enhancing communication then?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so 4 components. Observe, which is separate from feelings, needs, and requests. So, just to be clear, right, I will speak an example of this, but not always does it have to be out loud. I might observe clearly a situation without having to tell my observations to the person I'm speaking to. I might acknowledge my own feelings without sharing them, but there's a certain appeal to this. So on and so forth. NVC isn't always the verbal expression like we said before. Sometimes this is an internal process. My dad would be someone that is generally unwilling to sense feelings or hear feelings from others. And so as I've practiced this, I've had to just simply stay in the state of doing these steps, especially these ones, with myself, and this one most dominantly. So we'll use an example, like my dad was on the phone with me, and it was one of those moments when there's a little bit of conflict here. I had decided to homeschool, and my dad's talking to me about, well, how are your kids going to learn this and this? And I tried this, so I heard his words, and I said, Dad, it sounds like you are worried that your grandchildren are not going to learn what they need to succeed in life, right? And I did it out loud. That conversation ended within 30 seconds. I was like, well, okay, bye. So that was flustering to him, and since that point, I had to pull back and be like, okay, this is what my dad's feeling. I'm not going to say it like that right now. And that's okay. There's actually a story in the book about a man. He is in Japan, and he learned NVC, and his dad, 30 years of just going to lunch with his dad and never speaking this compassionate communication with his dad, but it was alive in his heart towards his dad. He was sensing his dad's feelings. What was the needs behind his feelings, right? What possibly could my dad need? And that was from a father who just generationally, feelings were not okay. So, point of that story, you don't always have to verbalize this. And it can often sound weird to people who don't know what NVC is. Like, I observe. Mm-hmm. And because of that observation, I'm guessing you're feeling, right? So it can be nonverbal. So this is straight from the book, page 3. Nonviolent communication guides us in reframing how we express ourselves and hear others. Instead of habitual, automatic reactions, our words become conscious responses based firmly on awareness of what we are perceiving, feeling, and wanting. We are led to express ourselves with honesty and clarity, right? Like your friend, right there. While simultaneously paying others respectful and empathetic attention. In any exchange, we come to hear our own deeper needs and those of others. NVC trains us to observe carefully and to be able to specify behaviors and conditions that are affecting us. We learn to identify and clearly articulate. The form is simple, yet powerfully transformative. Okay, so just a quick example of all 4. So I could skip NVC and say, disgusting, don't you know how unsanitary going around without shoes on is? You're in a public place, it will hurt your feet, and that smell. But if I go through the 4 steps, I might say something like, I noticed you took your shoes off. A little more than that. And after you did that, there was a smell that joined the room.
There you go.
It wasn't there
That's
before.
great.
I feel alarmed.
That's actually a good idea.
I'm needing clean air. Would you mind putting your shoes back on for me? It's not necessarily perfect. You can't say that the person's going to hear that and be like, that was so heart-opening. And I'm okay. A little more detail about each of these. Now, this is the thing. Like, this book is really quite simple. Like, I can read a paragraph and be like, oh, that's simple. But to then go and apply it and get even into the little nooks and crannies, there's so much depth to it. So I am kind of trying to just give you the basics. I do, my heart desires for that to be enough. I want you to be able to begin practicing it, but I hope that the study continues, right? Like, there's little nitty gritty things about it. So observe.
So one idea about practicing this, it sometimes can be a hard thing to just be like, oh, I'm going to do this with everybody. It can be exhausting. But you might pick someone that you feel comfortable with and ask them if they'll be your buddy to practice this with, so that you can take it at your own pace, just as a thought.
Comment on that. Build on that. It is challenging, and the easiest thing to do is just to let it kind of fall by the wayside, even when you have the great knowledge. But like with so many things, we can build our capacity over time as we try. So it's this. All we're talking about. All that point was, it seems to me, is we gradually, and we just need to have patience with ourselves. We can build our NVC muscle just by doing as much as we can do, and gradually we'll be able to do more.
Nail it and scale it. We're gonna, right? Not be worried about having to tie this perfectly to the whole world. I'm going to work on my internal state with this one person, like Ben said, my practice friend who also knows this, or, I look at this as the beginning of a community that has awareness of NVC. Demi.
I like what you said about awareness, because that's one thing now that I've gotten married that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so aware about all this stuff that I didn't even know, Like, my husband will be like, I see you're having issues, and I'm like, it's like, it's nice to have somebody point it out to you.
Sister.
But it's nice, like, it would be nice if I could just see it myself. And that's what I like about nonviolent communication, is it's really opening up an awareness of who you are, and you can actually take a lot more control if you're actually aware of what's going on with you as a person.
And you can take that specific acceptance of your responsibility to then make, actionable changes. Okay, so this one gets back into this idea of moralistic judgment. So we want to make observations that don't have the judgment mixed in. So observations without evaluations. And it's really just generally difficult to do, to be free of seeing a person and their behavior not tying into some sort of judgment, criticism, or analysis.
I have a comment. Is that okay? It reminds me of something Jordan Peterson said, is that we don't see things as a thing. We see them as a means to something else. We see everything as a purpose and not as for what it is.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to make this holistic judgment in the sense of, like, I see the negative thing that this will bring to me. I see what this person is, the impact of this person, or the comment, or whatever situation it is. There was more. But there's a flip side to it too. I think part of it's changing the way what we see, what we perceive could come from the situation. It's the same thing with weeds. It's the same thing with it. And there's an event that happens, and we see it as fear-based, like this is going to bring something horrible to me because it's not what I want, or do we see a different purpose in it, a different yield, because that's just naturally the way we're wired to think about what's going to be the outcome of what's the utility of whatever this is.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing that you're perceiving the goodness or badness that will come your way on your perception of it. And from the permaculture idea, that oftentimes it's perceived bad, even by ourselves, until we learn something new about it or shift that awareness. Even the problem has something to offer us. Even the weed is a gift in our system, right? Yeah. And one comment from Marshall is that when we combine our observation with evaluation, we decrease the likelihood that others will hear our intended message. Instead, they're apt to hear criticism and thus resist what we are trying to say. Let's practice a couple. Let's see. Whoops. Page. So I'll read a phrase, you tell me if it is an observation or an evaluation. So let's start here. Stephanie, you want to take one? Sure. Okay. John was angry with me yesterday for no reason.
Say that again to you and not that way. Are you done?
Just. John was angry with me yesterday for no reason. Is it an observation or an evaluation?
Oh, that's an evaluation.
Yes. Right? He might have been feeling something in there. But for no reason isn't a clear observation. Okay. How about Claire? You want to take one? Yesterday evening, Nancy bit her fingernails while watching television.
That's an observation.
Yeah. Anyone else want to take one? You want one, Brad? Okay. Sam didn't ask for my opinion during the meeting.
Evaluation. No. Wait a minute. That's a what's the other choice?
Observation.
Observation.
Yeah. Yep. He could have easily gone from that to be like, he hates me. And
I know he hates me. For sure. Obviously he does.
Let's see. Sharon, you want to try one? Sure. Janice works too much.
That's an evaluation.
She does.
I don't know, I think that's fine.
So, an observation of a similar thing without the judgment mixed in. Janice worked more than 60 hours last week.
Ooh, can I confuse that one?
No.
Yes. Janice works a lot.
Ooh.
Evaluation.
Oh, yeah. So, you said that do it with, we're to observe without evaluation, otherwise they will not hear, otherwise they may hear criticism and not hear the intended message. So what is the purpose? What's the intended message for you to say, I noticed you took off your shoes?
It provides context.
Yeah, it'll depend on each situation, but so if we use the shoe example, it really comes in from my heart that I have this need to be able to breathe freely without feeling suffocated by something that I smelt as offensive, right?
So we're back to judgment then. So there is judgment. It's just not critical judgment.
Yeah, it's a values judgment.
Values judgment.
Oh.
I need fresh air.
Oh, okay.
Your shoes being off your feet was polluting that. Evaluative statement.
But right now we're just on one. We're just trying to observe without making an evaluation. So here's a question. Janice worked herself into exhaustion.
It's like
Is that an evaluation or an observation?
Could be.
Well,
Depends if you're quoting. Are you quoting her or are you giving?
well, it's just my
Then it's an
my
evaluation.
observation. But if I say Janice worked 60 hours, that's pretty safe. Like, did she or didn't she? Well, let's count the hours. If I say Janice worked herself into exhaustion, I might be right about that, and I might be wrong about
It
it.
doesn't matter about right or wrong. It's evaluation or
But
observation.
no, my observation might be wrong because I'm attaching, and I think she was exhausted. She may not have been. So
Was there anything you could observe that led you specifically to
yeah.
think that?
Well, let's say I think I saw evidence of that, so that's why I'm saying that. But do I truly know that, or am I putting that on? Like she might have been loving that, and that's just how she ticks. But I put a judgment on it that was too much for her. She was exhausted from that, and it looked like she was exhausted because she was tired after she did it. So that I'm just thinking that one is an evaluation. It's not an observation. Okay.
All right, let's go on to feelings. And yes, I admit, right, there's so much more we could go into this, but feelings. How do you think we're doing as a society in our emotional repertoire of expression?
Feelings?
Yeah, our feeling,
Yeah.
our ability to express a wide variety of emotions.
Yeah, I feel like it's very limited. It's like maybe 5 or 2.
Yeah.
Probably 2. Anger or
Hungry or angry?
happy.
Angry.
That means there are 3 then.
Yeah, or angry.
You're just one.
I would say even worse than our ability to feel a wide spectrum of feelings is our ability to own our feelings. In fact, we're seeing that unfold very rapidly across our nation, and it's very alarming.
That's a lack of responsibility.
People
Or
respond out of, go ahead.
or even observe our feelings at all. I feel like there are some medications which may help someone be stable, but my observation in interacting with that person is that they're just dull. There's just nothing. There's no range of emotion.
Evaluation. Would that be evaluation?
There is an evaluation.
There is. I haven't learned the tools yet.
Oh, neither have I.
This is not one afternoon session, this is like a lifetime.
We're practicing.
We're blocked from our feelings.
I just like the beauty in this expression of it. The mature person becomes able to differentiate feelings into as many nuances, strong and passionate experiences, or delicate and sensitive ones, as in the different passages in music in a symphony. Yet for many of us, our feelings are limited to the notes in the bugle call. So really the challenge here is first for us to invest some time and energy into just recognizing our feelings. What are they really? Being able to identify them. The book has a feelings list, and I'm not ashamed to admit that sometimes I have to be like, so hold on. I know, okay, there's a list in here, and then I'm like, okay, I'm feeling. And then that takes a moment. So I'm learning, I'm expanding that capacity, and I invite you to do the same.
I have a question. So, like, when you're doing this, is it me? Am I observing someone else, or can I do this to myself, saying I am observing myself doing this, and this is the feeling and like the need? Can I go that way as well? Does it always have to be me going outside and saying, like, I'm observing this about you?
It's an internal and external process.
Okay.
And there's a choice there, right? At this moment, am I going to just check in with myself that I'm feeling and needing, or am I going to step out?
And there still could be another person involved, but you could observe that you're feeling angry,
Okay.
and you observe that you're not in a state right now to be able to handle the conversation that's going on, and you have a need for some space to gather your thoughts, and so you make a request that they excuse you while you take some time to yourself to get better.
Okay. So a whole chunk of that was internal, and it didn't necessarily involve empathizing with what was going on with them in that moment. It was very much about here.
Okay.
And I submit that maybe, or communication. You will only be as good at doing this with somebody else as you are able to do it with yourself. You will never be able. You will never be better at doing it externally than you are doing it internally.
So I did print off some feelings lists. I'm just going to save them. You can grab one at the end as a reference, right? We're going to start practicing right now. But I do, like, there's a couple of cool little things. This idea of a false feeling, or phrases that we use that try to express a feeling, but they just plain don't. So words such as that, like, and if. So putting these in examples for you. I feel that you should know better. Was there actually a feeling expressed in that?
No.
I feel like a failure. Was there a feeling expressed in that?
That's deep.
But I went ahead and labeled myself, right? But there was no feeling in there. So just watching that, I feel like moment, right?
I feel like you're right.
Most of the time when we use that phrase, what we actually mean is I think or I believe, right? So it's not that what you're trying to say is wrong. It's that we just want to raise awareness about how we're using our language.
And I apologize to everyone now that you know this, because you're going to start hearing yourself and other people say it a lot.
I feel as if I'm living with a wall, right? Was there any feeling in there? No,
What does feeling with a wall even feel like? I don't even know.
I'm feeling isolated.
Oh,
Maybe
okay,
it's
that
where
makes sense.
Intimacy, you're not being met.
Right.
Or if I feel is followed with our pronouns. So I feel I am in survival mode. Is that a feeling? Could I have taken the time to identify the feelings associated with this being survival mode?
Amy,
Right? Overwhelmed?
can I share my own personal thing about this?
Okay.
So the reason for this is that if you are used to expressing false feelings, so you're saying I feel like, but it's not an actual feeling, it can distance you from your real emotions. So it's not a matter of like getting nitpicky with yourself or others. What you really mean to say is I think or it seems like, but you don't need to come down on yourself for your habitual way of talking. It's just a tool so that you can train yourself to say, oh, I feel like, no, wait, what am I actually feeling? So try not to be too hard on yourselves or others as you explore this, is my suggestion.
Yeah, like you probably shouldn't be afraid to just say that statement and then rework it. Like,
Yeah, don't let it stop you.
yeah.
We
The
all,
first draft thought.
Yeah.
we all need pioneer plants, like the elm tree.
There you go.
Pioneer statements.
Yes.
Pioneer statements.
I think this is really interesting, and going back to the model of the head, heart, and the gut, the emotions, and we're putting our gut into our brain by saying I feel like something I think, and then we're associating the heart with our feelings, like just follow your feelings. It's like don't argue with this horrible thing because it's my heart said, right? But just reordering that, I think is really cool. Observation.
So again, there's nitty-gritty details, more to do with those words. I'm not going to dwell on those right now. What I want to do is another practice opportunity. I want us to, in a moment here, stand up, move around the room. Would be nice, right? Find somebody who you're not related to and who you didn't come here to the PDC with.
Okay.
And I want you to just have a conversation about how are you feeling, okay? Now, little background, like walk in somewhere and you come in contact with a person there coming this way, and the common greeting is, how are you?
Yes.
Oh, do you
just want to say
there was an opportunity for connection. What I think we really mean to say is, hello. Unless
Nice to
we
see you.
mean to actually stop and have a response to that question. It's just one of those things that I'm aware of now and not perfect at, because I made this internal commitment that if someone said, how are you? That I'd be okay with the awkwardness of being like, because if they're coming this way, how are you? Well, actually, and not be afraid to actually take that moment for connection if they offered it. Or more so,
To train them not to offer.
I'm doing conditioning of their behaviors. Maybe they'll stop. I know.
Does he talk about going too intimate with anyone?
Not that I recall.
So you can go as intimate as you want.
Not recommended.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
still recommend using.
it's your choice.
Use it for good, Brad.
Right? Like, okay, let's talk about that one later. Okay, that one sounds like I'm gonna have to go into the world of philosophizing for a moment. Okay, so are we ready to do that? Like, so when you talk about how you feel in this moment, really check in. How are you feeling? It's not good. It's not fine.
Okay.
You have more alive in you than that. So really answer, how do you feel? Okay?
So the exercise is
Find
to ask
someone.
each other how they're feeling.
How are you? Can be just fine. But answer
Actually,
with
it's
real, like,
So wait, what's the exact question?
how are you?
How are you?
And then say a feeling. In
And then we do
Respond with
what?
feeling.
I'm feeling.
Answer with actually having checked in with how we are here. So how are we feeling?
So it might look like a shopping list of feelings, and that's the answer.
It could. Right?
Well,
Like
so-
I'm feeling tired and irritable and
Well, is it a feeling or is it a state of being?
like this thing to be.
Well, how are you? Are is a to be verb. How are you? So
Right, but in English, we do that all the time. We can say, I feel sad, but really we can cut out the feel.
okay, so we
I
can
am
choose
sad.
to
It's a
talk
state of
about an
being.
emotion as part of our state of being.
In
Okay.
English.
So
Other languages make clarifications.
I feel like I need that list.
Yeah,
so
that's
we're just going to try to honestly answer the
I
question.
said that way.
Wait a minute.
What?
That makes sense. That comes to me. Yeah. I
I'm not really
wasn't safe to express my emotions, so I literally don't know how to express my emotions.
So I'm asking you guys to tangent in just a little bit and let that conversation just roll. But it looks like there was connection happening, right? An opening of compassion as we shared honestly about what was really the feelings that were really inside our hearts. We moved beyond how you doing, I'm good, how you doing, I'm fine, to really connecting around our feelings. So then let's look at our needs. Needs and feelings are associated, so you guys now all have a feelings inventory. Notice that at the top it has this side as feelings when your needs are satisfied. Feelings when your needs are not satisfied.
I should have noticed that. They're a lot longer.
Right, well, we might be able to make them just as long, but if I'm noticing that my daughter is whining and different things, I often realize that she's probably tired as her primary feeling in the moment. Despite there might be other things we need to talk about tomorrow, but her need is for some rest because we will never be able to solve all these other emotional things that are coming at me until rest has happened. Just an example of how important it is that we tap into what the needs are. And it's pretty similar with feelings. I admit my need for this list sometimes. I also sometimes need the list about needs. I'm like, what does that really mean that I'm needing? So there's a needs list. Not that this is comprehensive, by the way, but you can get this one after. But you might just be like me in a state where I need just a little assistance as I practice this muscle. Kind of society-wide, right? We're just immersed in more of this. And paying attention to feelings and needs is not in the curriculum. And I mean that literally too. Like our public school systems are about what to think, how to analyze, how to judge, how to compare, how to form groups of cool kids and not cool kids, right? So we might have to spend some time consciously trying to think about and practicing that muscle of feelings and needs. But
If I could take that a step further, I think that side of the equation has a tendency to mock those people who talk about their feelings or share their feelings, it's seen as a sign of weakness or something lame and uncool. And so it further alienates those who want to be in touch with their feelings or want to share them.
Yeah, has anyone felt that? You expressed vulnerability or thought about it, but there was shame all around that, kind of a discomfort, right? So I don't know how to express my feelings, so I'm trying to learn it, but this person is also very uncomfortable with their feelings, so I try, and they're like, okay, I'm out of here. Thank you, Ben.
I think another aspect of life that has caused me to feel less safe in expressing my feelings is there is someone in my life who is constantly dumping emotionally, and there's really nothing I can do to help her apart from listen, but it weighs me down to listen. And so it's like, well, I don't want to be that person to somebody else.
Right? Are there ways that we can express emotions, but then help us to shift from that emotion and get our needs met? That's what we're really wanting to practice. And this person, it sounds like, instead of then moving on to getting their needs met, they're stuck.
Yeah.
Right? And there's multiple reasons why people might do that, but every behavior is an attempt to get a need met. Sometimes that is successful, sometimes it's not. You see this in young kids, right? They're still maturing and developing, and they plop down on the floor and they cry. They're just trying to get a need met. It might be that they're hungry, it might be that they're tired, it might be that they want their way, right? That child has a belief that they need that toy and it's not coming to their way, so this is their attempt to get that need met. And it's easier to see in children, somewhat more challenging for us to pause and say, this adult who's abrasive in this moment, I'm having a hard time pausing to see if there's a need behind that, right? But there is, and keeping that in mind can help us shift into this compassion state. Again, right, sometimes we'll stop and assess our own needs in this situation or the other person's needs.
Question, Amy, how do you assess another person's needs? Because I know sometimes I'll ask, but like, okay, what do you need? And they don't really know. Like, they can't really, like, I'm okay with asking, like, I'll give you whatever you need, but I can't, like, figure out what you need, you know? And if they don't know, like, how do you like, coach them into understanding what their needs are?
Okay, so I like that you're acknowledging they probably just have weak need muscles, right? They're not in tune with what they're needing. So as we practice this, we can, instead of the blanket statement that is hard, especially for children, but even us adults who were raised outside of this rich emotion and need world, we might need somebody to guess at our need. So it might be I don't have an example right on hand. I think what you're needing right now is companionship. Would you like me to sit with you for a time? We could go on with many examples, but if you want to brainstorm more, let's talk later.
Okay.
Can I comment? I think that's where the needs list really shines. Like if they're open to it, get the list or Google NVC needs list and find something and say, if you're open to this, let's sit down and just look at these and see if any of these resonate with you.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Amy?
I just wanted to make a comment. To meet somebody's need in my realm, in my thinking, is like a plant. Going into near a plant, and the plant, from different signs, there's what's happening. You can sense they have a need. Well, you know they have a need, and you can see it. But it's more of a spiritual, connecting spiritually, a prayer in your heart. What can I say? What can I do? And the same with the plant. You go in there and you just try to intuitively, spiritually feel for them, because sometimes they just can't say it, and sometimes it doesn't feel right to say it. Does that make sense?
Or sometimes I need time to figure it out still.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to recognize in the nonviolent communication model, it's important to get to the understanding of what the real need is, or the communication isn't going to be successful. So somebody comes at you and is saying words and motioning, and if you're not able to, you've got to ask yourself, what do they need? And you've got to be successful at figuring it out, because they don't seem, well, they probably feel the need, but they may not be able to state what it is. And so most of the people that we come into contact aren't thinking about this carefully structured model of communication. They're just blah. And so we can be like, okay, I can control this situation by controlling how I react and respond. So I need to understand what's going on here, observe what are the words coming out of their mouth. Are they in a state of disarray? What are all the clues and evidences? What do I see? Then, what am I feeling? What is my heart adding into this state of observation? I'm going to say it that way. What do I feel? Now, what does this person need? Okay, so...
Yeah. And part of what I heard was that we're going to receive light and knowledge from a higher source sometimes too.
Yeah, I would say that heart check, right? That like...
Coming here.
That like... A guy... this is a form of communication, right? A guy is running at me, he's screaming, and he has a knife in his hand.
That's not violent.
But that's figuratively what's often happening, right? So, is he a murderer? Does he intend to kill me? Did he have a really bad day? Is he on drugs? So, we don't actually know what's really going on here. But there are some immediate needs. I need to get out of the way of a potential risk. He may need to be knocked out or somehow disabled, or this might not end up good for his future. So anyway, yeah, but heart check, because the heart now brings in something more than the brain. The brain is speculating, the brain's observing, but the heart can kind of come in and say, yeah, that guy intends to kill you, or that guy is out of his mind, or take 2 steps to the left, or yeah, okay.
Right, again, but it isn't always what's coming out here, but we're receiving that information in our observations and then perceiving needs and feelings in others, not always just from our own knowledge base. So thank you for that, Josh. So, because of time, I'm going to just jump into requests and then we'll wrap up. Can I start this one out? Stephanie, did you happen to tell these guys how the plants talk to you sometimes? Like, do plants ever make requests of you?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Can you give us just one example?
Yeah, and we talked about it a little bit last night. It is that heart communication stuff. Obviously, they're not like, come outside, I need to be waited. It's not that level, although I can kind of hear it that way. And a lot of time it is for companionship. Like when I leave, like now, I can feel them like, I know you have to do these things, but when are you coming home? They're kind of like children and fathers and mothers and teachers kind of all wrapped up into one system, but there's a relationship there where I miss them and they miss me, and there's this expression of that exists only in my heart. Until I started to perceive communication through my heart field, I didn't hear anything. It's not a hearing, it's a feeling. And so that expression is nonverbal. It's not even a physical necessary. Sometimes it is. They look a little wilty. I clearly understand that they need some water. But oftentimes it's much different than that. It's somewhat hard to explain, but when you step into it a little bit,
you just start to get these senses and understanding of them being beings that are alive and in communication and in dialogue and in relationship with you as lover, father, mother, brother, child, all of it wrapped up into one.
That has stuck with me for the whole year, right? Like, and I'm pretty sure plants are pretty clear, and I'm just making this assumption. I haven't heard them talk to me much, but I hope to creating more of that connection. But that the plants are clear. They're gonna say, I need you to this. It's a principle of NVC that you're going to phrase it in the positive instead of the negative, right? Stop stepping on my left root 3 inches down, right? Instead, like, tread softly around me. But let's take it into the realm of the human world. Again, I'm not going to keep telling my kids, stop leaving your dishes all over the house. We as human beings receive better when we hear it praised positively. I'd like to see you, after you've dirtied a dish, please take it to the sink and rinse it. Whatever like the system is that you then execute, doesn't matter. You're just phrasing it in the positive. What do you want the person to do? So if I've gone through all the steps and then I'm coming to this request, making sure that it's worded clearly, in the positive,
Hey, Amy?
and with concrete action language. Give me 1 second, I want to finish this thought with concrete action language. You can get pretty vague, right? I want you to show me some respect. Well, thank you for wording in the positive, but what does respect mean? That might mean ask me permission before you go and start doing it, and then I catch you doing something that you were asked not to refrain from doing until after you have permission, right? Like, you don't wait to cross the boundary. Right, I'm just trying to clarify what I meant by respect. So, just having that more concrete clarity as you make these requests. Yes, Ben?
We didn't go over this when we were prepping, but do you think it's needful to clarify the difference between requests and demands?
Yes. Yes.
That's in our second hour, or third hour.
Oh, that's gonna be
Noted.
read the book.
If
Noted.
there's interest, I am happy to prepare more, go into details, do some more.
It'll be our
But I'm happy to leave it as it is too, depending on the needs of the group. But
I'm curious if in the book there's some discussion around needs and requests and when that is our own responsibility to care for, and how you understand when my need or request really has more to do with me and shouldn't be put upon someone else.
right, and
how
yes.
to find that.
And then also not thinking that just because the request was made, like I have to be the one who can do it. We have to honestly check in with ourselves and be able to respond. Otherwise, we're acting out of obligation instead of that pure desire to connect and be compassionate.
So, it might be helpful. I am thinking of the story where he's in the Middle East or Palestine.
Yeah.
What if we just quickly went through that? That will bring all those 4 steps together in an example.
Okay, there's actually another one. This one and then one about a girl who works in with an at-risk population, and it's quite poignant also.
Okay.
Maybe I could get someone up here want to do like a reading with me. I'll take one role, the other person. Jared, do you mind? Unless, actually, do you guys want to do it together?
There you go.
You're welcome to,
I don't have my shoes.
edit out.
I have a need.
I haven't smelled you.
Oh.
So this is your first time reading it, so it's okay if it's not super You're right.
May skip some words.
Yeah.
Let's get though a British accent. No, I'm just. Go ahead.
Little background. So which one do you want to be? Marshall is in Palestinian Muslim, speaking with some Palestinian Muslim men, about 170 of them. And during his presentation, right, as he was coming in, he noticed some things that were actually telltale signs that helped him later with this interaction. So there was attitudes towards Americans at that time that weren't favorable, and these people were living in a refugee camp.
Oh my.
So high tension anyways. And as he was speaking, he suddenly noticed a muffled commotion amongst the crowd. And this will be your audience member, your Marshall. He hops up and first says,
I'm the author of this book. That's the person I'm reading for. I just want to I'm reading for the author.
so whispers in the audience, and the translator says they're whispering that you are an American. And then this audience member stands up and yells, "Murderer!" And then people join in with this, right? Assassin, child killer.
Sorry.
So Marshall here focuses attention on what the man was feeling and needing, and had some cues, such as on the way into the refugee camp, seeing several empty tear gas containers that had been shot into the camp the night before. And on each canister was clearly made in the USA. Okay, so there was a lot of anger that he was aware of towards the United States for supplying this tear gas. Okay, so Marshall, who just got yelled at, and the audience member is now standing up and shouting at him.
Are you angry because you would like my government to use its resources differently?
You bet I'm angry. You think you need tear gas? We need sewers, not tear gas. We need housing. We need to have our own country.
So you are furious and would appreciate some support in improving your living conditions and gaining political independence.
Do you know what it's like to live here for 27 years? The way I've had to with my family, my children, and all. Have you the faintest idea what it's been like for us?
Sounds like you're feeling very desperate, and you're wondering whether I or anybody else can really understand what it's like to be living under these conditions. Am I hearing you right?
You want to understand? I tell you. Tell me, do you have children? Do they go to school? Do they have playgrounds? My son is sick. He plays in the open sewage. His classroom has no books. I haven't seen no school that has no books.
I hear how painful it is for you to raise your children here. You'd like me to know that what you want is what all parents want for their children: a good education, opportunity to play and grow in a healthy environment.
That's right. The basics. Human rights. Isn't that what you Americans call it? Why don't more of you come over here and see what kind of human rights you're handling us?
You'd like more Americans to be aware of the enormity of the suffering here and to look more deeply at the consequences of our political actions?
Yeah, so it does. He continued in the middle of this 170 individuals to continue to hear the man's needs and feelings and check in with him. And it frequently was like his best guess, offering it to the man. And the man, at some level, felt heard, moved on to the next thing, or continued to express until he was fully heard. And the miracle of it, our dialogue continued with him expressing his pain for nearly 20 more minutes, and me listening for the feeling and need behind each statement. I didn't agree or disagree. I received his words not as attacks, but as gifts from a fellow human willing to share his soul and deep vulnerabilities with me. Once the gentleman felt understood, he was able to hear me explain my purpose for being at the camp. An hour later, the same man who had called me a murderer was inviting me to his home for a Ramadan dinner.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's
big.
So what was his purpose there? Was he teaching this communication?
Let me see. He was presenting nonviolent communication to the group. So,
And before they would listen, they needed to know that his heart was okay.
and Marshall admits himself that he never did this perfectly. It was totally practiced for himself. And you can hear these stories and think maybe he lived that all the time, and it was amazing to just be around Marshall. And I just want to admit that it's the same thing for me. Like, I'm a student of this, never perfect, and yet let me reword that. Power of our words, right? Striving towards that improved, continuous improvement towards having all of my interactions be compassionate and open, where I can really hear the feelings and needs of both myself and others. And really, one of the purposes for NVC is to resolve conflict in the community. There's a chunk that we're not going to get to today, and that's okay. Just more about, really what I want to end with is where Josh started, right? We've got a choice to make our communities what it is we want them to be. Which one are we invested in? And is there such thing as holy communication? I'm not saying this is perfect, but can we strive towards shifting away from life alienation communication to life enhancing communication? And practicing this compassion towards yourself also. There will be times when you are here. But that doesn't mean that we then label ourselves or pass judgment. Just stay with the principles, practice them, practice a little self-love and self-compassion, some generosity. Use those moments when you're like, oh, I just said it, and allow yourself to learn from it. So, NVC is not simply a language or a set of techniques. It's that consciousness, that's the intent, expressed whether through silence or quality of presence in the moment, simply being with a person while we hold that space to acknowledge their feelings silently. Facial expressions and body language. But we are at our core compassionate people, and the point is to help us engage in that compassionate relationship with other compassionate people, because we are, at our root, all of us compassionate in nature. So, anything you want to add?
Okay. Yeah, I'd like Stephanie to come up and you to stay. You might want to. I don't know. I'm going to sit. Just you're not wrong, but a couple of minutes.
Amy, are you available afterwards for questions?
Yes. Every little time from here on out.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
it's going around while we're talking. Okay.
Okay. So I want to go back to the beginning, looking at that definition of communication.
Just one.
Okay, what is communication?
It's to deliver something and to receive something.
Yeah.
Express.
So remember that root word common.
It is an attempt to reconcile inner state between two bodies.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh.
Or there could be more scenarios than that. So it is something on the inside that we are desiring to put to the outside of us, whether that be a room full of people or just one person or a garden of things, of living beings. So we want to focus on, we have an internal state. And we have this desire all the time to let what is in here go to the outside of us. So first we want to be there. Second, we want to get out our Jordan Peterson. What is his rules for life? Clean. You know this?
No idea.
Clean the room.
Clean your own room first.
Oh.
Before you judge the world. And that includes the person standing next to you. So, what is your internal condition? Before you talk, before you let that out, what is it? Is it good? Is your heart in the right place?
Fear
or are you blocked from it? Are you bloated from lunch? Are you frustrated by everything? Are you at your wit's end, or are you good? Are you feeling calm and connected and that life is generally good? So what is your condition? What's going on in there?
That's the observer.
And what is your purpose in letting that out to the world? Do you want to dump on someone else to distract you from your misery? Are you seeking feedback for a condition you're struggling with? Why do you want to take what's inside and put it to the outside?
Sometimes vomiting feels so good.
Self-gratification.
Amy said that
But where-
every
who should do it to?
behavior
Exactly.
is to fulfill a need. According
Okay.
to Marshall.
What's the burden?
Yeah, okay. And if you do that, will it fulfill the real need?
Yeah.
Okay? It could, potentially. Or we might think, well, I'm doing it because I need to, but actually the outcome of it isn't fulfilling the real need. Like I told that guy all my problems, but I still feel miserable.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, now
Number 3.
NVC is offered typically in a situation between two human beings, but we want to enter into the broader community of beings, the herb garden. Okay, the plants, the animals, everything, even the rocks. Okay, even the inanimate things. When we go about our day, are we going about it like a soldier fighting a battle? Are we at war with everything we interact with? The scriptures have this phrase, kicking against the pricks. Now what are the pricks?
The things we stepped on the other day.
The thorns.
Those little tiny, thorny things that grow out there.
Are they...
So what is it? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So if you're kicking against the pricks, you're having this interaction with pretty much an inanimate object, like you're kicking rocks or something.
Me kicking against the pricks is my anxiety. That's how I would describe it.
But what are you kicking against?
The reasons that I have the anxiety over.
Well, in terms of according to that phrase, you're just kicking against nothing. Actually, you're kicking against something that hurts you back.
Has no feeling.
And it's just a prick.
It still hurts, but yes.
It's an inanimate
Look
object.
that word up. What is a prick? And so you see, really, again, it's all about your condition. And so what is your inner condition? And if you let that out, is it going to be a good thing? Or is it going to be destructive? Now how, we just want to draw a couple of connections here into our permaculture conversations. In the permaculture, or from the context and the examples we've been giving you, so let's say you go into your garden, or you go out into your front lawn, you see a dandelion. And now what happens? What are the possibilities? What's the range of possibilities? What was the you before you came here going to do? What?
Well, in this case, I already thought that a dandelion is a good thing, but I hear where you're coming from.
Was there a time in your life where you're like,
Yes.
that dandelion can't
Yes.
be there? Okay, was that a judgment weapon? Was it moralistic or values-based? You see it and you think, that can't be there.
Uh-huh.
So you've imposed a morality, you've made a judgment. And then, what do?
Rip it up.
You go to war. Because that's what a moralistic judgment leads to. That dandelion doesn't deserve to exist. It's in the wrong, it's bad, and I am justified in violence.
Poison it and then going to tear it apart.
And what is the outcome
And
of
everything else around
that?
it.
What is the outcome of that?
You're not going to be happy, and
Death.
neither will the weed.
That's the strongest answer. But you don't get to know the dandelion. You never learn that it's trying to grow there to help you, to enrich your system, to offer you medicine for your liver, or what, any of the number of other things it would do for you, to cure the wart on you. You never get to that state of consciousness because you weren't over here. It was all over here. You saw it, moralistic judgment to war. And you objectified it in the process. It's not a dandelion to you. It's an offensive object. And because it's not alive, it's an object, I can destroy it if I want to.
And on the other side of that, you could be looking at the dandelion as valuable and objectifying it as an object also. I want it, I'll take it, I'll eat it. Which is true, you are going to do that, but it's still a living entity that's here in relationship with us. It's not, even of rocks, but it's not an inanimate object. It's not a hammer. It's a living being that's also objectifying it, even if we say that it's good.
Right, so concept, we have stewardship over this world. Does that mean we own this world? No, so we can't do anything we want with it. Well, we can't justify doing anything we want to. Yes, we're given leeway. We're given agency to make mistakes so that we can learn. But it isn't our thing to destroy.
We won't be happy if we make certain mistakes.
So we have to be guided by, okay, I have stewardship over this thing. I have a responsibility to act a certain way. I'm in charge of this space. Like if you're in charge of a class of preschool children, they're not yours to abuse or to, make into food or to, exercise with them, or they're other living beings, and you've been given a charge to care for their nurturing. And yes, you have to decide how you're best going to do that. But they're not yours. And so, pretty much everything in this world is like that. You're given something from a higher power. You're given $100. What are you going to do with it? You're given a car. What are you going to do with it? You're given a spouse. How are you going to treat her? But when you objectify, you're no longer treating them as you're treating them as what you own them, and they don't have life. So you can, and it just falls into kind of a false logic. Well, it's actually, it is logical, but it's logic without a complete perspective. So over here, we have to always evaluate, am I objectifying this thing? Am I idolizing this thing? Am I entering into an inappropriate relationship with this thing? How shall I govern myself? Okay, any corollaries to permaculture that you can connect?
One of the things that you said earlier on in the week was, don't look around as if what it can always, like it's food for me. Don't look at the food like it's for me or something. Do you remember talking about that at all? Like what it can do for me all the time, like that. Okay, I'm gonna skip and I'll put my thought together and
okay.
I'll come back to it.
Well, maybe this is what you're trying to say. When you are observing the environment around you, let's say living things, let's say plants, and instead of saying, okay, which of these can I eat, or which of these will be my medicine, just acknowledging that those plants they have innate value just because that dandelion is wonderful just because it's a dandelion, being its dandelion self.
Its primary value is that it's alive,
Yeah.
that it is. That's its primary value. And if we're aware of that, we're not so quick to say, oh, it's food for me. That may not be in your best interest. So you have a lot of stories of you have one idea of what you're going to do in your herb garden, and then you don't do what you were thinking you were going to do. Why?
Because I listen.
Yeah.
Because I walk around in the morning with my tea, quiet, and I listen. And sometimes it's just not the right thing to do, and it doesn't make logical sense. Like right now, I really should pick this entire patch of blue vervain because it's perfect. The bees are all over it, which means, like we talked about earlier, that the flowers are in full nectar flow. It's the highest version of medicine it can possibly be right now. And I should pick it. I should pick it and sell it and give it to people as medicine. But I just don't want to pick it right now. And so I'm not going to pick it. For whatever reason, I don't understand the full implication. It doesn't want to be picked. And that is okay. And it doesn't matter that it's a commercial business. There's something else involved there, and I have to respect that reality and trust that whatever money I was going to make off of that patch, or whoever needed that healing, that will sort itself out. I feel in my heart that this is not, I don't need to pick this patch right now. And I can't really explain it deeper than that, but it doesn't want to be picked.
Pretty deep.
So there's this life right there. And the typical thing to do is monetize it. But really, is that the best right thing to do? Because if she were to follow, okay, no, I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to monetize you. If she followed that pattern consistently, where would that lead? We would call her a seller. And we can all get there sooner or later, right? Oh, you're just doing this for the money. You don't really care about these things. That's where it would lead. There has to be a respect and a deference, or it becomes about money or something else. It could be about pride. It could be about stubbornness or defensiveness. Getting locked into an action because you refuse to simply allow that respect to exist. That's maybe not the way I wanted to say it. Okay.
So yeah, I think I understand what I was trying to say is that we have stewardship. We don't own the plants. If we're in communion, this maybe sounds a little bit strange, but we're both trying to get to the next trophic level, which is the next development, and it takes a certain nutrition, spiritually and physically. And in order to do that, I need the weed, and the weed needs me. The weed, and I don't really know how that works, but the weed needs me to enter into that next trophic thing. It wants to be used, if it's for the good, if it's for the general public, if it's held in common. But I shouldn't go around and say, oh yeah, that weed is that dandelion is my slave. It tells me it does what I tell it to do, when I tell it to do it. Instead, it's a communion thing. We're doing this together. I need you and you need me.
Yeah, it has a level of agency, doesn't it? It does. That dandelion has certain discretion, certain reaction.
And it's in relationship not just with me. It's not just our relationship, myself and blue vervain. That blue vervain is in relationship with all the soil microbes, with the bees that are pollinating it, with infinite other plants around it, and infinite, every person who walks by and sees that flower in its full expression and gets inspired to then go and plant blue vervain in their yard. There's so many relationships happening there. Mine with it is just one.
Right. And so yeah, at that moment, I'm gonna pick it. Wait, there's something going on that you don't understand. Something better happening.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, well, sick people need this. Well, what if the bees have more access to it? And then honey is made, and then that honey is what somebody really needed. Or so that there's a higher potential. So that principle, the highest good of all. Well, wouldn't it be good if I did that? Well, yes, but it could be better if you didn't. There could be a higher output. So we've talked about understanding our internal condition and trying to be aware of, okay, what is that? Is it good? Should I release it out to the world around me? And we've talked about not objectifying other living beings. We've talked about not being at war with the things around us. And yeah,
I
okay.
have one more comment, Joe.
Go ahead.
Is it the right time?
Yeah.
Why is this so important? Because we can understand these relationships with the plants and the animals and all these things and get good soils. But the ultimate thing, again, is to develop. And you've mentioned, one of the comments you made is that, if I understood you correctly, there are no communities that can make it. It always ends with the people. The people, when they get into their communities, did I hear you right, that that's a level of nutrition and development that we haven't yet been able to achieve? The communes and
the Georgia communities?
Yeah, like the permaculture culture, like permaculture communities, like eco-villages, yeah, that's what it was, yeah.
They're failing because of the lack of some of this.
Yes.
Oh yes, they are.
Yes, like, and you told us that it doesn't exist, and so why is this important? It's because there's a level of development that we should aspire to.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
if you're at that level of not picking the vervain, there's so many things you're not going to have to struggle with besides that. Like, you know, if you're in a dispute with your neighbor, and you'll be able to, how can I put this? When you're not at war with everything, you don't have to fight everything. And, okay, yeah, so... Okay, any final comments? Okay, Beth, you first.
Well, it's more a question. So, okay, I don't know how else to ask this other than to be personal. So, I feel at war with the world because my values don't match the world's values. I don't feel the world is safe for me. So how, like, I can try to be open-hearted and compassionate with everyone I meet, but I don't feel safe. So how do you learn to not be at war anymore, in that defensive war?
Right.
Develop faith.
Well,
And feel love of God.
To stop believing the lie that that's true. What did the scriptures teach you? That you're not safe? Or did they tell you all things are possible? Did they tell you that God will give you what you ask for? And so you're living in a construct that isn't real. It is safe. But because you fear that it isn't, it will change all your decisions.
And attract certain things.
So, Jared and I spoke about this a little bit when we kind of were mixed up. I love all of these principles. I agree with every one of them. I take issue with the name of this system because it legitimizes speech into violence. And there's presently a trend that I'm seeing in Canada and the United States that I believe to be very disturbing, which is people saying, your speech is violence to me, so we need to pass legislation to shut you up. And I'm seeing this primarily aimed towards Judeo-Christian groups and Islamic groups. And so, and that's, you know, in talking with Jared, I also reconciled, well, no, like, speech can be violence. You think about verbal abuse. But there's this trend that's present currently that's like, people are weaponizing their feelings based on what somebody else said. And sometimes it's a person simply citing a statistic that is factual. And the person says, I don't like that statistic because it invalidates me, and I think that's violence against me, so you need to shut up and stop talking to me. And so I'm kind of curious, what is the difference between this violence and the violence that people are claiming and trying to pass legislation to stop speech?
What I think it's similar to the difference between Zion and communism. There is, for every true principle, there is a, forgive the term,
There's a
bastardization of it.
There's a counterfeit.
Counterfeit.
Well, and here's the primary difference. This system is not trying to it's not trying to govern you or force you. It's not compulsory. It's not mandating. This group of people can't say that. This system is trying to get you to understand what you are saying and the effect of it, or get you to understand when somebody else opens their mouth at you what's going on. So nowhere in this system is it calling for a law to be created or for punitive action to be taken against a particular group for using their mouth. It's calling for understanding of what happens when we use our mouth. Is that a fair answer?
It's a fair answer, and like I said, I agree with all the principles that were taught. I take no issue with any of those. But it's this idea of calling it nonviolent communication and then saying, well, we shouldn't have violence in society, so we now need to legislate laws to prevent violence. And so I guess the issue I take is this kind of legitimizes the fact that communication is violence. And yet I also recognize that in instances language can be violence, but it seems like we're, as a society, we're taking it to a point of, well, we need to stop violence wholesale, and that includes speech violence, so we're going to shut down speech.
It can be violent.
Can someone say
But what we do about that reality is the issue, not that it is a reality.
Well, and they're not defining violent communication the same way this is. I mean, this was a big aha moment to have everything under that Heart Wars side say this is violent communication. It's like, oh my gosh, that's how I've been spoken to. That's the model I'm trying to break out of from doing my, saying to my kids as well. That's violent communication. Wow. But overall, the system is trying to teach you how to have heart-centered communication.
Well, it might even be actually saying, I can't say to Josh, you're speaking violently to me.
Yeah.
That hurts my feelings. So that would be kind of against what this principle is. It's much more about me and how I speak and how I understand Josh's speak rather than a request for him to speak to me. I mean, I agree. And I think it can get slippery, like the shoe thing even, and my question with the needs. When does that, you're feeling uncomfortable with my lack of shoes for whatever reason, you also have the right to open a window or go outside. And when does that not need to be a request of the community? And when is it just your own responsibility to recognize your own need and go solve that need for yourself rather than request that I change my behavior to suit your needs? So it's
the opportunity that we have here with these principles that I see it is to be a light to others. And so as we go forward, we're going to have different things we come into, but you take these little things, like I have neighbors curious in what permaculture is when I brought it up. Well, that opens the door to talk about it and then to go into level with different things. I've told different people here with my time in the military, I had lots of opportunities to do missionary experience or have missionary opportunities just because people were like, okay, why are you different? How come you don't cuss, or how come you don't join our porn nights and stuff like that? I mean, there's doors that get opened up, and so this is an opportunity for us to be a light, in a general sense that we're and share these principles that you, Stephanie, and you, Josh, have taught. So,
I'm just curious. You just wanted to express that you were afraid that they would take the name of this kind of communication and use it and twist it for their own means? Is that?
I actually haven't had that thought, but I can see how someone could read this book and then with their own position, ideological position, say, well, here's someone who's written all about how nonviolent communication should be present and your communication is violent to me. I guess it all comes down to this idea that people are less and less owning their feelings in society and thinking that somebody else has the ability, or doesn't, it's not even that somebody else has the ability, but somebody else is causing the feelings in them, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this lack of ownership and this lack of responsibility, which I guess really comes down great to that model of the big city here on the right side and the countryside on the left, where it's like in the big city, it's all about giving away my responsibilities. The government needs to take care of me. I don't have these needs met, and it's this other person's fault.
Right. But the point is, you can't control the other people, but you can control yourself, and you can own your own feelings and understand what it is you're doing. And in so doing, you can often unravel or heal the situation for somebody else coming at you. It gives you the ability to resolve the conflict. And so it's advocating that you, again, observe what's really going on, check in with what you're actually feeling, analyze what is really needed. This is all, personal responsibility oriented. Even beyond that, like I can be a force for good. I can go into a situation that could be dangerous, and I can bring that to a peaceful conclusion potentially. So,
if you have someone who is chronically violating your needs, and you do not have the option to walk away.
What's an example?
Well, I stood up and gave an example the other day, right? Where I talked about
she's not violating your needs, though.
my need is to have a moment of peace and quiet, right? And I convey that to her. I've even told her, Jada, I need 5 minutes. She's like, okay, I can do that. And then 10 seconds later. And I guess we talked about the idea of having a clock so she has a visual knowing here's when it's okay to talk again. But I can see, that's an example from my own life, but I can see other instances where you're think of an abusive relationship, right? So as that individual who's trying to practice this, what are your options when walking away isn't an option?
So they become a circumstance, regardless, and you still have the opportunity to choose. They haven't taken away anything from you.
Yeah, the final step is the request, or step 4 is a request is made. Am I willing to do it or not? Can I do it or not? So to consider the appropriate action that you're going to take. So at no point are you forced to say, well, I'm observing, feeling, and I'm addressing all of the needs, and now I'm a slave to that. I have to meet that need. Because the 4th thing is now make a decision if you can do the thing that is being asked of you, or what is the appropriate action for me to take at this time. If it's a balance between her needs and your needs, your need may win out if it's stronger.
I think that example is a little bit past NVC, and NVC doesn't cover all interactions or inform all relationships, but it gives you a tool to use in your interactions. Now, if NVC no longer becomes an option, then you can proceed on to other principles like laying down boundaries and stating your boundary and a consequence for that boundary being violated, for example. And that would be outside of NVC. But NVC is something you can do while there's still communication happening, while that's still on the table.
Well, it sounds like we could keep going. So dinner is ready. Amy is available for one-on-one chats. Is that correct? Non-violent communication statement.
That is, though I will honor my needs of time for rest and taking care of responsibilities, like I have to go water the garden, So
you have to go.
Okay.
You all passed the test.
You want to retry that?
One final thing.
I thought we were doing
We we need you to be aware of this as much as you can. When we interview our clients, we want to try to put this into practice. And so it's going to be a conversation, right? And so think about,
Finish it.
think about what they're saying. Think about what your response is and why you're responding that way. Try to put a little bit of this into it. Probably anchor yourself into those 4 components, right? So really think about what they're saying, what's going on, and try to tune into. You tune into their feelings and your feelings. So, yeah. Anyway, in the context of the interview with the client, so that you can do the design that you're being asked to do, it's going to require very successful communication, not making moralistic judgments like, well, hey, we want this or that. Really? You want one of those? Well, those are bad, Like that's going to kill a job, or even if you take it, it's not the good energy to go into to make this design, right?
We had a college class, and they were doing a design on the college itself, and so they were interviewing the dean about the project, and they just, as permaculture students, could not get past the fact that there are soccer fields. The soccer fields are momentous waste of water, and the design was not even about the soccer fields. It was a permaculture food forest over here back behind the dorms. They could not but what about those soccer fields? And they just kept coming back around it, and you could see the client getting like you're not understanding what this is. Stop judging me for the soccer fields. We have to have the soccer fields, whatever the case may be. So it really started to. So it was kind of a lesson interview too. So we stopped it, and then we rephrased it and kind of led it a different direction. But
Clean your own room first.
Okay.
I was just going to add, also thinking about when you deliver your project, you're going to have a panel of people giving you feedback.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of those confrontation moments where you might be receiving some pressure towards you. You get to choose how you respond to that, and you can use this as a tendency to want to justify, right? And didn't oh yeah, well, but let me explain all the reasons why we put this in, even though you don't like it, based on what I already presented.
Did that happen to you last year?
I observed it last year.
Okay.
I did get feedback, but I observed it and was just, I welcomed the feedback. Is how I chose to do it during our presentation.
Yeah, so you may have done something really beautiful in your design, right? And you're really proud of it, and somebody's just like, yeah, that's illegal, or that won't work, and so now you may want to, and it's appropriate if you think, no, they're wrong. Well, this is hard, but you're like, I feel like my design is the right one. Can you turn that around? Can you parlay or justify? I'm hearing that. Let me validate what your concern is. Perhaps let me reiterate this thing over here. So
there might be more information that was forgotten.
It's hard because you can fall into this defensive trap. I have to defend this part of the design. I can't let them take this apart. And that's all you got now. And you get trapped in that. And so,
based on your values, you might think your idea is better, but they may have different values.
Right. So yeah, an evaluation of values. At any rate, it's going to be super fun when we do this. So just some more stuff to try to mix into all the other zillion things that we're asking you to consider when you do this. Okay. So why don't we just do the prayer right here?
Can we get a round of applause for Amy? She worked really hard on
this. Yeah, let's just say the prayer right here. That'll be easier. Do we have a volunteer?